One of the things that I've found that we as Americans hate to do is waiting. We hate waiting at the red light, we hate waiting in line at the grocery store, and we don't like waiting, especially when our own personal gain is on the line. And I think we as American Christians have adopted this type of mentality. And because of that, we hate waiting on God's timing, and especially when He has us in a waiting stage. But God does have several things to say about this in His Word, and one of my favorite Psalms, Psalm 62, talks about waiting, but waiting in the right way. And I'm going to read from Psalm 62. For God alone my soul waits in silence. From Him comes my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be greatly shaken. How long will all of you attack a man, to batter him like a leaning wall, a tottering fence? They only plan to thrust him down from his high position. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they curse. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from Him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. On God rests my salvation and my glory. My mighty rock, my refuge is God. Trust in Him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before Him. God is a refuge for us. Those of low estate are but a breath. Those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances they go up. They are together lighter than a breath. Put no trust in extortion. Set no vain hopes on robbery. If riches increase, set not your heart on them. Once God has spoken, twice have I heard this. That power belongs to God, and that to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love. For you will render to a man according to his work. Now in this psalm, I've seen about three distinct stages in this psalm. The first stage talks about who God is and what we should be doing as we wait. And the second part talks about those who would oppose us. And the last section addresses who God is and what that means while we're waiting. Now I love how the psalm immediately starts off with, "For God alone my soul waits in silence." It shows that David knew exactly who was in charge while he was waiting, and who he was supposed to be running to while he was waiting. It says several times throughout in verses 1 and 2 and 5 through 8, God is our refuge. He's our mighty rock, our fortress, our strength, our refuge. We won't be shaken because it is God who we are trusting. And another interesting point in those verses, it talks about waiting in silence. And I think this is very hard to do, especially for American Christians, because we like to complain loudly when we don't like something. However, it doesn't give us an option. We are to be waiting in silence. And this is shown in the language. In verse 1, it talks about how David, the psalmist who wrote it, is waiting in silence. My soul waits in silence. David is actively waiting. He's doing what he should be doing. But in verse 5, it says, "For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence." David correctly addresses the fact that waiting in silence is not an option or a suggestion that God has made. It is something that we are commanded to do. So in our waiting stage, it is God we are to be looking to in this time, and He's very worthy of our trust, and we are to be waiting in silence with no complaints. And in the second section, which is very interesting to me, David addresses those who would oppose the children of God. Remember, this is a song, so they would be singing this out loud, and it seems rather odd that in this song, they would be singing about those who are inwardly cursing, even though they seem like they're blessing, and those that would destroy the children of God. However, it does seem to fit. I looked in the ESV study notes, and it talks about how sometimes we as Christians can forget that we do have opposition even in our waiting period. There are people who want to see us fall. Like in verses 3 and 4, it talks about how they're attacking. They're not slowing down, even though this person is waiting. And in verses 9 and 10, it talks about how they have a certain mentality that they follow. And I think that as we wait, we tend to grow weary of waiting. We're tired and we don't want to do it anymore. So mentalities and attitudes tend to creep in. But David reminds those children of God that put no trust in extortion, set no vain hopes on robbery, and if riches increase, don't set your heart on them. So it's very easy to adopt a worldly mentality when we're constantly being attacked. But even in our waiting stage, we are to fix our eyes on God no longer adopt the worldly mentality. And then in the last section, my favorite section, it talks about a reminder of who God is. In verses 11 and 12, it reminds us of two of God's character qualities. It says, "Once God has spoken, twice have I heard this, that power belongs to God, and that to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love, for you will render to a man according to his work." And I think something that is very fascinating about the Hebrew language is that if something is stated twice, it means that any emphasis you can put on it, you put on it, and you pay attention to what is being said next. So the fact that God has power and he has steadfast love is very important. Now the first one to look at, it says that power belongs to God. This could seem kind of cold and calculating. That means that God put us in our waiting stage and he can take us out because he has the power to whenever he wants. This could seem slightly confusing to those who are following God, because we might be tempted to think, oh, God is sitting in heaven saying, haha, you're in the waiting stage and I'm going to keep you there because I have nothing better to do and because I'm annoyed with you this morning. That's not how it works. That's why you need to couple it with that to God belongs steadfast love. He wouldn't keep us anywhere any longer than we need to be because he loves us and wants us to learn from him. Which means, and this is something that I've been realizing recently and is very exciting to me, God has the power to put us in the waiting stage and to take us out whenever he wants. And because he loves us, he won't keep us there any longer than necessary. Which means if you're in the waiting stage, you are exactly where God wants you to be. You might think that there's something better out there for you and you should be somewhere else, but because God is all powerful and all loving, his best is already before you. I know there are several times where I complain about work because I want to be teaching so badly, and I don't like the job I'm at because it's not what I want to do. And so I'll be praying to God and I'll say, Lord, you know I hate working here. You know I don't like this job. Why would you have me here? But then almost immediately after, I'll have a coworker that wants to talk about God. Or there's an opportunity to be joyful amidst this very stressful situation. And God reminds me, I have you where I want you. And if I wanted you somewhere else, I'd be putting you there. So you need to be content in this waiting stage and being where I want you to be. It's so encouraging to realize that God has the power to remove us from any situation. And he loves us enough to keep us there when he knows that that's what we're going to learn the best and be an encouragement to others. So waiting is a very hard stage and not many people enjoy it. But I think if we can look at it the way that the psalmist addresses it, it can be a very beautiful thing. If we remember, God is the one we are looking to and will show us how to act during waiting. And remember that we have opposition, but that God is the one that will keep us and remove us in the waiting stage whenever it comes up. And there's a song that I think about whenever I read this psalm. It's all about waiting, and the chorus goes, while I'm waiting, I will serve you. While I'm waiting, I will worship. I will run the race. I will not faint, even while I wait.